Hello and welcome to the latest EnvCast episode. EnvCast is a Society for the Environment podcast, bringing you environmental professionals in conversation each month. I am Sarah Ridgeon. I'm the Policy and Communications Officer here at the Society for the Environment. Our podcast is designed to provide insight into the lives of registered environmental professionals, featuring experts from across a wide range of sectors and disciplines. We explore what they do, why they do it, how they got to where they are now, and their future ambitions. Each guest is registered with us as a chartered environmentalist, registered environmental practitioner, or registered environmental technician via one of our professional body partners known as our licensed members. As such, they have each been externally verified to confirm that they are committed to good practice in their environmental work. To learn more about the Society for the Environment, our environmental registrations, and our licensed members, please visit SocEnv.org.uk. For this month's episode, I am pleased to introduce Chartered Environmentalist Becky Toal, who is registered as a CEM via her membership of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, or IEMA for short. We're going to be talking about Becky and her work in general, but with some specific focus on Becky's role and experience at COP26, which of course happened in Glasgow last November. So it's great to be chatting to you today, Becky. So firstly, can I just ask you to tell us a bit more about your role and what you do on an everyday basis?
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the introduction and also for the opportunity to be here today on the SocEnv EnvCast podcast. It's great. So yeah, my name's Becky Toal, as you know, owner-manager of Crowberry Consulting Limited, based in Chorley, Lancashire. And I set up Crowberry Consulting in 2006 to enable sustainable futures. And I look after a team of about 6 members of staff now. We work nationally and internationally on sustainability auditing, training and consultancy. So various international standards, some you might have heard of, some you've probably never heard of, including things like PS 2060 for carbon neutrality, ISO 201, which we'll talk about for sustainable events. So yeah, busy bee, getting busier and busier, which we'll touch on later as well, I'm sure, Sarah. So yeah, currently managing a small team, hoping to grow the company as well and supporting our clients.
Fab, thanks, Becky. Yeah, a really good overview there. So could you just tell me a bit more about how your background and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. No problem. Thanks, Sarah. So I grew up in a town called Crosby, which is 10 miles north of Liverpool. And when I was a kid, I used to always cycle to the beach in the 70s and the 80s. And I love the freedom of like that habitat, you know, the wildlife being quite close to the sea, or as I used to call it, the ocean. Obviously, it wasn't the ocean. It was the Irish Sea. But that kind of inspired me to learn about ecology and nature and how things interacted with each other. So after A-levels, I went on to do a degree in ecology at the University of Sheffield. And everyone thought I was nuts. They were like, you're not going to get a job. This is like a waste of time degree. You know, it's not going to lead to anything. And I graduated and I thought, well, how can I use this degree? And I realized there was something called environmental impact assessments, which you can slot into with the ecological assessment. So I then did a master's in EIA, which is still popular today, and you still need to do those things today, Sarah. Unfortunately, when I finished that, I graduated into quite a strong recession. So there weren't many jobs going back in the sort of late 1990s. So I, funnily enough, saw an advert for a fully funded MBA at the University of Liverpool. And this was an MBA in environmental management. And it was kind of like a gift from God, really, to have anything fully funded in the late 1990s. So I thought, right, I'll go for the interview. I'll see if I can get onto this course. And it would be my last degree because I'd like done 2 already. And then when I did the MBA, in environmental management, it really inspired me because I learned a lot about how businesses can start to adapt and incorporate and implement sustainability, environmental management policies, energy policies, ethics policies. And I thought, this is it, you know, this is where I want to go. If I can help organisations, public sector, private sector, to understand what sustainability is through policies, strategy, processes, training, that's going to be a super positive thing. And then after I did the MBA, I worked for a bit as an environmental manager at English Nature, which is now Natural England. And then I moved to the Cooperative Group in Manchester. I was there for a good sort of five and a bit years. And during that time, the UK signed something called the Kyoto Protocol in 2005, which was the first legally binding, if you like, set of sort of climate targets on the UK government. And I thought, this is it. 2005, everyone's going to go, net carbon zero now, climate friendly. We're all going to have carbon policies. So I had this idea in my head to set up a sustainability consultancy since like early 2000s. And then in 2006, I did it and I created Crowberry Consulting. So in 2005, I actually got my chartership with Society for the Environment. I am a chartered environmentalist through my membership, as you rightly said, in the introduction through IEMA, which is the Institute, obviously, for Environmental Management and Assessment. So that's how it all came to be. Really. So it's been a very interesting 16, 17 years since I set up the company, and it's only going to get more dynamic and more exciting, Sarah.
Oh, that's great. It's really interesting to hear how, it all started with your interest in the environment quite young. And that's something we hear a lot about on the podcast, guests telling us how they sort of became interested very young, and then how you've sort of developed through the years and got all this sort of quite a varied experience, really. So thank you for that overview. So if I just ask you now, like, what are some of the challenges you face in your everyday role, would you say?
Definitely time management. Everybody wants everything yesterday, which is like, especially coming out of this pandemic, a lot of people, like our clients we work with, are panicking because maybe their ISO certificates are running out, or actually, like, in order to win a tender, they need to put a carbon management plan together, and they see this weird word sustainability and they just go into like a complete meltdown, and then they contact us, thank God, so we can help them. But the other big thing that's a challenge is obviously recruitment of skilled people, and recruiting people who've got the behaviours, the competencies and the skills to do the job. So we've been quite fortunate. We've signed up to the apprenticeship program. We're obviously a Society for the Environment employee ambassador as well. So we champion SocEnv status, and we're part of the Lancashire Skills Pledge as well in Lancashire to commit us to train our own team, our own staff. So we've done that quite successfully as well. But I think recruitment generally, Sarah, in the sustainability and environmental management sector is an issue. And I would like to say, if there's people listening to this podcast that are maybe more mature and want to move into sustainability, that you can actually do that. And I would encourage you to look at the IEMA skills map, to map your skills, your behaviours, your competencies to where you could be if you retrained a little bit to come into the sector, because we want to encourage young people, more mature people to come into the sector, because there's a desperate shortage of the skills. I'm sure you'll agree, Sarah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we see that across sectors, really. And one thing I'd really like to, emphasize what Becky's already said, really, is, there's so many different ways of getting involved in the profession, and so many ways of helping your professional development as well, whether that's IEMA qualifications or any of our other licensed members, and obviously our professional registrations, RMTech, RFP and CEnv as well. So yes, I'd really like to emphasize that as well. Do you feel like you make a difference in your role? I mean, I think I know the answer to this in the sense that you do so many great things. So do you want to sort of elaborate on that? I
mean, we have got, yes, overwhelmingly is the answer. And we have got clients that we've worked with, Sarah, for 10 years plus. Can you believe that? And during that time, we've seen major improvements through continuous improvement programs such as ISOs and PAS, publicly available specifications, on things like energy, environmental management, but also ethics management. I think, modern slavery, transparency in supply chains, biodiversity as well. 16 years ago, when I would say to clients, oh, have a think about sponsoring your local wildlife trust, or have a think about hiring a beehive, they just look at me like I was a lunatic. Whereas now they look at you and go, oh yeah, that makes sense, because it connects to, ecology and climate change, and it connects to CSR and local community investment and social value, which again, these are phrases that are becoming more normalized now, whereas maybe 10, 15 years ago, people would just look at you like, what are you on about? So yeah, I think definitely, and a lot of the clients that we've worked with, some of them have left and moved on, and they've gone, like the employees have gone on to different companies, and they remember us and they call us and they say, oh, Becky, do you still do that weird ISO stuff? And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of my job. So, and that's really lovely because we do get like a legacy sometimes with the customers in terms of like sustainability management as well. So yeah, I think overwhelmingly, I can't name names, obviously, Sarah, I'm sorry, but apart from the one that you're coming on to. But yeah, I mean, we've got, case studies on our YouTube channel as well of various customers talking about how we've helped them and supported them over the years. But it's a joy, actually, and I call it the sustainability journey. I'm sure other podcasts have mentioned this, starting from zero, going right through to completely embedded and engaged, linking to one of the ISOs that we work on, which is 2012-1. So yeah, I would say absolutely, you can make a difference in the role of being a sustainability manager for sure.
Oh, it's really nice to hear all the positive engagement you have, and yeah, it's amazing. So, and I'm glad to hear as well, like you say, about the greater environmental awareness, and that's definitely something that we see across sectors and also the general public as well. So, all positive stuff there. So, if I just move on. I think we're going to focus today a little bit on COP26. So that was the UN Climate Change Conference, which happened last November, and you were there. And firstly, I wanted to ask you a bit about your experience as a delegate. I was there as well, and it was an amazing experience in many ways. So yeah, did you want to elaborate a little bit on your experience as a delegate first?
As a delegate, and it was great to meet you up there as well, Sarah. We met for a coffee, didn't we? And we went to the green zone, and that was lovely, to kind of have those connections. So there were two zones: the blue zone, which was all the political negotiations, the UN territory, and then there was the green zone, which was more open to the public and included, quite some fun and funky exhibition, information, and sort of a cinema as well. And I think from my point of view as a delegate, what I was kind of really struck by was obviously the protesters were all super, super young, but actually from so many different countries as well. I had French accents, Italian accents, Danish accents, all sorts of different accents. But it was actually great to see a lot of young people really engaged with the Conference of the Parties, UNFCCC, as you said, COP26, because they're the generation that's going to be living with climate change the longest. And they're the ones that rightfully so are angry and want, governments and political parties to do something about tackling, climate change and removing greenhouse gases. So as a delegate, yeah, I got caught up in some of those protests as well. The electric buses got delayed and all that, but it was okay because that's part of it, isn't it? You kind of expect it. But it was just really nice to see so many young people actually go there, in their teenage years and in their early 20s, and you think this is great. Like I say, they're going to be living with the impacts of climate change for longest. So, it was very energizing to see that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It was a really positive experience. And like you say, met so many different people, including young people. And it was really great to see there was that Youth and Public Empowerment Day, a day dedicated to that as well. So that was really, really positive. So apart from your experience as a delegate, you also had an important role within the summit as a sustainability auditor. So what was that like?
Interesting question. So I'll just give the backdrop for the listeners. Back in sort of February 2020, we were approached by Arup to come on board as a contractor to them to bid to be the sustainability consultants and to deliver something that your users may not have heard of or your listeners might not know, called ISO 2012-1. And ISO 2012-1 is the international standard for sustainable events management. So that was to deliver that to Her Majesty's government so that the build of the show, the design of the show, the delivery of the show, and the breakdown of the show, if you call it a show, COP26, was sustainable and met this international standard. So it did involve quite a long build-up, which I can go into in more detail in a minute, but it did involve me going up to COP26 during obviously show build and show live and show breakdown to do what we call sustainability audits. So following the international standard and checking for conformity to that standard. So it involved, during the pandemic as well, talking to a lot of people, doing the site tours, going out to the other venues that were part of the scope and boundaries of the system. So it was a very physical role, lots of walking involved, lots of talking involved, and lots of checking of documentation and actually like how the show was built and how the show was put together from a sort of resource materials point of view. So super interesting. but yeah, very physical role as well, Sarah.
I imagine. That's really interesting. Did you want to elaborate a little bit more about what it involved, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So during sort of February 2020, when we found out we'd got this contract to work with Arup and support HMG, at that point, the COP26 was going to happen in November 2020, and it wasn't until quite close that they called it and said, no, we'll put it into November 2021. So it got pushed back by a whole year. Which actually bought us a lot of time, which is an absolute joy if you work in consultancy to have magic time dropped on you. And then what happened was the government said, oh, we've done all this work now. This was around about January 2021. We've done all this work on building this management system called ISO 20121, Sustainable Events. How about we test it at the G7? And we had like 4 months to get it all ready for the G7 in Carbis Bay down in Cornwall. And that was like, okay, this is exciting. We're going to test all of our processes, our procedures, our policies, our training, do the internal audits, management review, etc. And we did. And the external audit body was BSI. And so G7 achieved the standard. So we knew that we had everything in place as per the standard requirements to achieve it going forward for the COP26. But obviously, Sarah, there's different stakeholders, there's different legislation up in Scotland, there's different risks, different opportunities, different sustainability issues based up in Glasgow. So it was a completely different show compared to the G7. So from a sustainability point of view and environmental point of view, during the pandemic, most of the work was delivered over Teams as well. So I didn't hardly travel anywhere, thank God. I wasn't on a train down to London all the time or up on the train up to Glasgow all the time. So it was only really towards the end when the show was being built that I went up to Glasgow, and obviously during Show Live, which was the 2-week period of COP26 that I was up there. So we kept our own personal carbon footprints to an absolute minimum. And we used apps as well, like the Miro app, which is basically virtual sticky notes, which is amazing if no one's ever used Miro. So you can have, a breakout room, a workshop, you can discuss, sustainability risks, sustainability opportunities, and just literally stick all these virtual sticky notes everywhere, which is amazing. And obviously SharePoint, using Microsoft Access, cutting and pasting, dragging and dropping files into various parts of the SharePoint. So I think the whole experience for me, whilst it was very challenging to do things virtually, it did massively reduce our carbon footprint and also our stress levels by not having to travel, Sarah.
Yeah, always a positive. No, it's really interesting to hear you talk about sort of ways you're innovating to sort of adapt to the circumstances. I'm sure that's something that we can all kind of agree with. In the last 2 years, we've all had to kind of think on our feet and try new things, which is always, it's a good thing, really. So yes, absolutely. So thank you for that summary. So just thinking about your CM status, obviously with this role at COP26, do you think that holding CM status was a real advantage for you, and how, if so, how, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I got chartered back in 2005 when a lot of people probably never really heard of Society for the Environment. It's a lot more popular now, isn't it, Sarah? But it definitely helps with credibility and also demonstrating competency, and competency is very much underrated, I think. And when people challenge you and say, well, what's your background, like what's your CV, like how are you able to do this job, then you can explain to them what your professional technical membership is, and you can explain the routes to chartership and why it makes such a big difference in terms of skills, competencies and behaviors, and the fact that you have been tested and you've gone through this rigorous process of interview and actually you've been deemed competent enough to have this status, which people then listen to that and they're like, oh, quite often, I think when I met you, I said, it's on my business card, CEnv, people think, oh, she's a chartered engineer or something. They get confused. And then I have to explain, show them the Society for the Environment website. And then they get it. They're like, oh, this is brilliant. If you're an accountant, you'd be a member of ACCA. If you're working in environmental management, sustainability, you can be a member of Society for the Environment and get chartered. So, and there's different routes to that now, like you said in the introduction, with the different methods to achieving chartership. So two big things for me, credibility and competency is what it gives you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would just emphasize that as well. I think it's really important. And thinking about what you were talking before about your background and how long you've been working in the industry and you've been building up that experience. It's a way of, chartership is the gold standard, and it's really showcasing that you have that knowledge and experience to do your role. So fantastic. So if I just go to the last question to do with COP26 itself. So is there anything, obviously this is now are we now 5 months on from Glasgow? It feels a while ago. It's gone fast though at the same time. So was there any sort of environmental commitment made at COP26 that you see as particularly significant, or any reflections that, now we've had this bit of time to reflect on the conference, anything that particularly stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Glasgow Climate Pact, the sign off or the agreeing of what's called the Paris Rule Book, transparency and frameworks for reporting on greenhouse gas emissions and, giving people common timescales. But the two things for me, phasing out of the coal, and I've written down, 190 countries agreed to phase out coal power, which is a 76% reduction on where we are now in terms of planned or new coal plants. And then something that people might not have picked up on is to do with shipping and ships. The maritime environment is the Clydebank Declaration, which is obviously named after the River Clyde, where COP26 was based practically on the river. Do you know what I mean? So the Clydebank Declaration, which is all about decarbonising shared shipping routes. Have to be careful how I say that. But, maritime and marine quite often gets, I would say, forgotten about in the context of environmental management and sustainability. And, I've been lucky enough I've got clients that work in shipping and marine, and, I've done ethical audits on boats and things like that. So, it is out there. It's a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions as well. So to have that Clydebank Declaration, I think was quite important as well. And then all the other good stuff, which we could talk forever about, forests and methane and private finance, again, coming from where I worked at Co-op Bank or the financial services sector, getting more involved with ESG, definitely has helped. And it's making these issues normalised and mainstream, Sarah. So that's got to be a good thing.
Absolutely. And you think back to COP26, it was sort of all over the news, wasn't it? And I think it's obviously now we're after the summit. It's not quite the same now, but it's still very much in a topic of conversation. And you compare that to, a few years ago, and certainly a decade ago, it was not anywhere near to this level of awareness. So absolutely. So if I move on now to sort of the inspirational side of being a CM, so we talked about sort of the leadership, the competence, the credibility, and I think the inspiring others, and particularly young people, is a really important part of being a CM as well. So what would you say to others thinking about a career in the environment?
It's a super interesting dynamic sector to work in. No 2 days are the same. And, you can now do apprenticeships in sustainability management. I know University of Coventry's got one, for example. So if the traditional sort of degree route is not for you, you can achieve the degree earning and learning at the same time through modern apprenticeships. So that's amazing. And I think, if you've got values and principles in your life, if you choose to go and work for a business or an organisation, public sector, that reflects those values, it does make doing the day job a lot easier. If their values are transparency, inclusivity, integrity, product stewardship, people stewardship, that helps enormously because you feel connected to the organisation that you're working in. And the nice thing about doing a degree apprenticeship as well is it's for any age. You could be more mature, or you could be, like, say, 16 to 18, just looking at how do I go and spend the next 40 years of my life? What career path do I want to have? And certainly those career paths weren't really there when I sort of did my master's. I was thinking, okay, environmental impact assessment, because that was quite a new thing back then in the late 1990s. And my God, some of those early environmental impact assessment reports were like 300 pages, long, and you could literally use them as door stoppers back then. But I would encourage anybody thinking about a career in environmental management, ethics management and sustainability management, to literally go for it, but also to try and get advice. and to think, well, what do the steps look like? In 10 years' time, how am I going to get to where I want to be? And it's called backcasting. So like think backwards, like what steps do I need to take to achieve that? And I will sort of come on to this in the next question. I think you're going to ask me about work experience. It can be voluntary experience or paid work experience, and think outside the box. It might be that you get a lot of valuable experience in a different sector to where ultimately you end up. But that pathway kind of takes you to where you're supposed to be. So I think, if you're thinking about a career in environmental management, sustainability management, please do it. Listen to this podcast, because there's lots of amazing people talking to Sarah. I know you've interviewed a lot of really amazing chartered environmentalists who shared their career journey, and also reach out, to your local institutes and universities and ask them, what have they got in terms of, sort of more traditional academic learning, if you like, that you can do. But yeah, definitely, I would encourage people to consider it. It's a great career.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. And I think, is it like you say, it's making best use of all the guidance and mentoring that's out there. Like Becky says, there's some amazing people working across sectors and as environmental professionals. So it makes sense to learn from them as best we can. And yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. Yeah. And like you say, connected to that, I wanted to ask you about, what would you say to others thinking about becoming a chartered environmentalist?
I would say go for it, because I've certainly noticed, Sarah, a lot of top jobs now are asking for, membership of a technical institute. But if you're thinking about, becoming a C-suite executive or a senior, manager within a business on sustainability, they're going to look for chartership. It actually becomes stipulated in the job description, if you like. So if you don't have that chartered status, it could actually hold you back from, getting a promotion or going for a promotion or applying for these super exciting and dynamic jobs that are out there. And I think, again, linking it back to competency and credibility, you're going to be tested to prove that you've got these knowledge, skills, behaviours and competencies. So, why would you not want to demonstrate that and have that on your CV, and the satisfaction, if you like, of having achieved chartership, and then obviously you need to maintain it through continued professional development year on year, but to go for it. And that wealth, if you like, of knowledge, as Sarah said, it can be obtained in different ways. And I think there might be some undergraduates listening to this podcast today, and I would just like to encourage them from the bottom of my heart to apply for placements and to apply for internships, even if you don't get the first one that you apply for, to just keep chipping away and to keep sending your CV in, and don't get disheartened. It is a competitive process, obtaining placements and internships. But coming out of this pandemic now, there's been 2 years there where, unfortunately, some undergraduates and some postgraduates haven't had the opportunity to get a placement or an internship because businesses kind of shut the doors and closed the ranks for the 2 meters social distancing, blah, 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 working from home. So really, if you can apply for internships and placements, that will support you on this journey to achieving chartership as well. And I know it's difficult, and I know there'll be people listening to this going, you might have to take a hit financially to do some of these placements, student roles that are out there, but it's worth it. As I always say, short-term pain, long-term gain. It's an investment in you. It's an investment in yourself to get that chartership status. So any investment in yourself is never wasted, and it will always pay dividends into the future. But sometimes you have to take a hit to get the advantage, if you get me drift, Sarah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you said, it's a very rewarding profession. You can see the impact that you're making. Yeah. And you also have that access to sort of a whole network of like-minded people as well. Like I say, across sector as well. So connecting with so many different interesting people. And I think, obviously we would really encourage people to go for it and get involved in the profession and to sort of go along the road to chartership, I guess. So, Brilliant. So do you have any sort of final words, Becky? I think we're sort of bringing this to a close, but any more? You've already said quite a lot of inspiring words there, but any more? I
think we're in this weird period of history, aren't we, where we're coming out of a pandemic. a lot of people are reflecting on their career and they're maybe resigning from roles. It's called the Great Resignation, I believe. But if that's you and you're thinking, sustainability or environmental management, energy management, ethics management, this is the time to do it. This is the time to retrain. Maybe go and do a part-time master's or, an online degree or a degree apprenticeship and look at what the Society for the Environment can offer you. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to change your direction personally in the career that you're in. And if you want to become, more involved in sustainability, there are oceans of jobs out there available right now. I know recruiters are struggling to fill a lot of the roles. So if you are one of those people that's thinking about doing it, do it. A classic phrase that I use is leap and the net will appear, because if that's the path you're meant to be on, then you will be supported in that journey of your own personal, professional career development. So I would just encourage you to go for it.
Thank you, Becky. And I think there's some great words to end on there. So all that remains is me to thank you again for being part of today's podcast and for all your amazing work that you do every day. So thank you very much. And thank you for everyone for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.
If you're curious to hear more about the Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner and Registered Environmental Technician registers, please take a look at our How to Become and Why Become recorded webinars on our website, socenv.org.uk. Or you can find them on our YouTube channel, Society for the Environment, where you will also find a variety of environmental webinar series and various different insights from registrants. To keep up with all of the Society's latest news, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at SocEnv_HQ and LinkedIn at Society for the Environment SocEnv. We will release a new episode on the first Wednesday of each month, so if you are interested in our future podcasts, please subscribe to hear more from us. You can subscribe and review through a variety of platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Castbox. Thank you for listening or watching on YouTube, and we look forward to the next episode next month.